Choose now, or the crown princess dies at midnight. The cold iron blade pressed firmly against the young page's throat, drawing a thin bead of crimson as he stared into the eyes of the High Chancellor. Julian could hear the grand-grandfather clock ticking in the corridor, each chime bringing the kingdom closer to the catastrophic hour. If he revealed the truth about the royal vault, the kingdom would fall to treason, but if he remained silent, the only person who had ever shown him kindness would perish. Julian swallowed the lump of fear in his throat and thought back to his daily duties, specifically how he polished the silver mirrors in the king's private chambers. He recalled how King Aldous always stood perfectly still, never flinching even when Julian accidentally dropped a heavy iron candelabra right next to the royal boots. The king had simply smiled, a stiff, unchanging expression that never quite reached his glassy eyes. The High Chancellor demanded an answer, his breath smelling of sour wine and dark magic. "I do not know the combination to the vault," Julian lied, his voice trembling as he maintained eye contact. The Chancellor sneered, throwing the boy across the stone floor of the dungeon. Julian bruised his shoulder against the damp masonry, his fingers brushing against a peculiar substance on the floor. It felt like dried, hardened pine resin, the exact same scent that always lingered in the throne room after the Grand Alchemist performed his weekly health rituals on the monarch. "You lie, boy," the Chancellor hissed, waving a hand to summon two armored guards who stood like silent obelisks in the shadows. The guards moved with a strange, rhythmic synchronization, their heavy footsteps perfectly aligned as if they shared a single mind. Julian noticed that neither guard breathed, their chest plates completely motionless in the torchlight. The Chancellor pointed his sigil ring at Julian, demanding the royal seals that could unlock the deepest secrets of the realm. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the dungeon burst open with a resounding crash. The Lord Commander entered, his golden armor reflecting the flickering torchlight as he drew his broadsword. "Stand down, Chancellor," the commander roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. The Chancellor cursed, stepping backward into the darkness as his two silent guards advanced with unnatural speed to block the commander's path. Julian seized the moment of chaos, scrambling to his feet and sprinting past the clash of steel. Julian ran through the winding, subterranean corridors of the palace, his heart hammering against his ribs. He needed to reach the royal chambers to find proof of the conspiracy before midnight arrived. As he ascended the spiral staircase, the grand tapestries of the ancestors seemed to watch him with judging eyes. He knew that if he failed, the lineage of the Sun Kings would end, and darkness would claim the Golden Empire. He slipped into the king's bedchamber, a room draped in heavy velvet and smelling strongly of sweet herbs and ancient wax. There, sitting in the grand high-backed chair, was King Aldous himself, dressed in his finest robes. The monarch did not turn his head as Julian entered, remaining perfectly static as he stared out the tall arched window at the gathering storm clouds. "Your Majesty," Julian gasped, "the Chancellor has betrayed us." The king did not answer, nor did he move a single muscle. Julian stepped closer, reaching out a trembling hand to touch the king's velvet sleeve. As his fingers made contact, the king's arm felt as rigid as a carved log. A sudden realization washed over Julian as he leaned in closer and noticed a faint seam running along the edge of the king's jawline, hidden just beneath the silver beard. With a gasp of horror, Julian touched the royal cheek and felt cold, polished wood covered in a thin layer of lifelike wax. The beloved King Aldous was nothing more than a masterfully crafted automaton, a puppet designed to mimic life. The real king had not been seen in decades, and someone had been operating this elaborate deception from the shadows to govern the empire. Before Julian could process the revelation, a soft ticking sound echoed from within the wooden king's chest cavity. A hidden compartment clicked open in the automaton's torso, revealing a glowing blue crystal matrix wrapped in ancient parchment. Julian reached inside and pulled out the scroll, recognizing the distinctive handwriting of the Grand Alchemist who had supposedly died 20 years ago. The parchment revealed a terrifying truth that recontextualized everything Julian knew about the kingdom. The Chancellor was not trying to overthrow the king, the Chancellor had discovered the puppet and was trying to destroy the entity that controlled it. The true ruler of the empire was the Lord Commander, who used the automaton to maintain total control while painting anyone who questioned the monarchy as a traitor. The door behind Julian clicked, and the Lord Commander stepped into the room, his sword still dripping with the Chancellor's dark blood. The commander smiled warmly, but his eyes were as cold as winter ice. "You were never supposed to find out, Julian," the commander whispered, closing the heavy door behind him. "The kingdom needs a symbol, a perfect, unchanging king who never ages and never makes mistakes." Julian backed away toward the open window, clutching the parchment to his chest as the storm outside unleashed a torrent of rain. The commander advanced, explaining how he had maintained the illusion for 20 years to prevent civil war. But Julian knew the truth now: the silent guards, the lack of breathing, the resin on the floor. The commander was replacing the entire court with mindless wooden constructs. "You are transforming the whole kingdom into a graveyard of puppets," Julian shouted over the thunderclaps. The commander raised his sword, his expression hardening into stone. "If the people know their king is a doll, the empire will burn, therefore you must be silenced." Julian dodged as the commander swung the heavy blade, the steel slicing through the velvet drapes instead. With a desperate leap, Julian threw himself out the open window into the pouring rain, catching the thick ivy vines that climbed the palace walls. He slid down the slippery greenery, escaping into the dark forest as the palace bells began to toll for midnight. The secret was out, the true traitor held the throne, and Julian was now the most wanted fugitive in the entire Golden Empire.